Yeah, welcome to the channel. This is Naz, and today I'm going to be talking about or focusing on the Saga of Tanya the Evil, to kind of give a little bit of spoiler-free review, and then after that, diverge and discuss a little bit of in-depth analysis of this tome right here. It just be, the video is going to have a structure in the beginning, and then after that, it's going to be just aimless. It's going to, we're going to see where we tread with this. So the story in this one is about a reincarnation, a salaryman, in Japan, corporate climber, dies, meets unfortunate death, and gets reincarnated in this world that is war torn. In a way, it's kind of reminiscent of pre-World War I Germany, where the country is looking for military supremacy, military army, developing their army, and just they are in like the imperial or the empire in this sense is surrounded by hostile nations, and that's kind of the premise. The premise is that Tanya or is against what she values most is freedom, or the freedom to choose whatever, so it's the individual is stacked up against the idea, or the empire, or the institutions that dole out responsibilities and that control us. So to what extent does the human being, what agency does the human have? Some of the questions that are discussed in here. So in a way, if I, without spoiling anything, the story revolves around Tanya trying to just fight against this outside force that's controlling her, but at the same time try to live a life that's economically logical and also politically driven. And she just wants to make the best of it. So she's seeing it from a way. She's very, very calculating, conniving, Machiavellian to the letter and spirit. A character that would recite something like, "Is it better to be feared or loved?" Something like that. Something like that. That type of character is the story that's being told. In the beginning, Tanya's birth sounds familiar, but since this preceded or came way before the beginning after the end, I don't know which one came before the beginning after the end. I have to look it up. But the beginning after the end, if you are familiar with that, you will know the light at the end of the tunnel. That's how the series begins, the light at the end of the tunnel for Arthur. And for Tanya here, the beginning begins the same way. And I just want to read a little bit here. In the beginning, there was only light. Then came a gentle sensation of floating, a brief repose. There was warmth and a vague restlessness, provoking a desire to lose oneself. Lose oneself? Yes, I've forgotten something. But what could it be? What could I have forgotten? Before a chance to face such questions came along, it suddenly began shivering. A moment later, its mind registered the cold, a chill that pierced the skin. Such was the nature of a newborn's babe first brush with the crisp, raw air outside the womb. So that was kind of the beginning of like setting the tone of the story. This book feels like reads like a standard operating procedure that you would get from your workplace. Corporate junkie, like a cubicle. If you're in a cubicle and you get one of these standard operating procedure papers, document that you have to sign off, that details the duties or the type of procedure or how you're supposed to do your job. This feels like that. It reads like that type of text. It feels like a college text that you need to analyze, read again, and write some sort of report on. This is how it reads. That's the type of language that it uses. That's the type of jargons that this uses, and it can be off-putting because generally, sometimes some people say that writing is accessible when it's kind of like just it is not something that is, I don't know, because depending on the type of person, the type of reader you are, some writing is going to be dense, some writing is going to be not going to be compatible with. It's just going to be tougher for you to read that, and this is kind of dense text in the sense that it uses corporate language and military jargons, and the way it describes things is from a military, a lot of people say that this is kind of reads like a military journal. So it's describing the events as a report, like as a cadet reporting to their higher, to their superior officer. It feels like that we're getting a report of what's happening on the battlefield. That's how it reads. So that language I think it's a choice of narration on purpose because this is a military fantasy. You know, it's war, and I think it takes a minute to get past it. But you know, in some way though, for some reason, I actually, even though I dislike it and it's like painful for me to read, but at the same time, there's this other side of me that's excited that I'm like being challenged and pushed back as a reader. And then after that, the initial stage of the story that in a way feels like one of those Russian dolls that are inside one another, packaged, you know. The story is packaged, and it's the beginning of the character that we get, you know, this calculating, you know, individual that climbed the corporate ladder because he knew the people that were hiring. He became friends with the manager, you know, some of the managers, and he kind of took cues from society, and he knew how to climb that ladder to success, make money, and just work, you know. And then he became the individual that fires people for the company, and he was firing somebody in the beginning. So the story begins with him firing this guy, and he's just sick and tired of this person's socially. He's just looking at him. He's condescending. Okay, and you get the point from the beginning. The protagonist is condescending. He's looking at this individual like you're just an inept heathen waste. That's kind of like the tone that you get, and from there, bam. So he's the boss. He's firing somebody, and we are in this corporate environment, and bam, you know, the story begins now. This is kind of the moment where Batman's origin story begins, where, you know, where his father and mother dies, and this is the event. This is the event for him. He gets pushed off by the train while he's about to ride the train home. He gets pushed in front of the train by the individual that he fired, so connivingly, condescendingly fired. You know, the coworker that he fired pushes him off. And in that moment, he's being rational. He's thinking, he's like, this is why human beings are not, you know, politically irrational. This doesn't make sense. And he's thinking about this, his death, in this sense of, what does it gain that person economically? What did he gain from pushing me? Just because I fired him, what's the vendetta? What's the point of this vendetta? It's not going to gain him any economical, you know. So he has that calculated idea, and then there is where we meet Being X. And that is actually one of the most interesting thing about this series that I have to kind of say is different from the other isekai genres. If we put it, like, juxtapose it, for instance, if we're talking about some of the series where the main character gets reincarnated or meets the deity and talks to the deity and is told this was going to happen. The perfect example is Konosuba, but Konosuba kind of like, I guess it's satire, it's revving on this genre. But we can see that, you know, he chooses the deity. He says, you know, you know, it's the deity, the individual that tells the, you know, the character that they're going to get reincarnated. The relationship that they have is drastically different in this one than in other ones. So in this one, that Being X is frustrated. And there are 3 reasons stated. I don't want to say those because if you want to read them, there are 3 reasons, or 3 Tanya, the salary gives 3 reasons, state that, you know, if things were not this way and this way and this way, then I would have turned out in such a way. Being X's problem with you know, the characters like Tanya is because they're not believers. They don't have any faith. They don't believe in God, and that is the issue, number 1. So in a way, you could say this is more like a battle between, you know, religion, but the religion that's being represented in here, for me, I would try to kind of like push back and say it looks like, you know, somebody that's not really religious, but has heard all the bad things about religion, and then decided for themselves that's it, but they've never really looked into religion or never really practiced any religion of any form, and because of that, and taking it to the extreme, you know, like fanatics, people that are very, very dogmatic, that want you to live the type of lifestyle that you're living, want to push their values onto you, and that is the biggest, I guess, antagonist, or the antithesis to our protagonist would be, you know, somebody that's trying to push their values onto him, and that is what he hates the most, and believes that individuals have the right to choose the type of lifestyle that they want to live in, and he criticizes it by calling it mass hallucination, calls religion mass hallucination, and he just takes this hard line approach and dismisses it all as nonsense. And he considers being X as the devil. He doesn't consider it as God. He's saying there's no way that this being that's messing with my life and just willy-nilly doing whatever he wants with me is a deity, you know, like something that is worthy of worship. But it's rather the devil. It's being X. And being X is pretty much, so that's the cool part. So the monologue, the internal monologue that Tanya is always having, pissed off at this being. That is really the hook or the interest. That's what's keeping me like involved and caring about this character. Like, okay, what kind of narrative, what kind of thought process? The internal monologue is really something that a lot of isekai writers use, so there's that monologue, in a way the narrator can also be the main character sometimes, and then they have this internal monologue with themselves, and then they're talking, and it's just sometimes quirky and weird, and it's really that keeps you there and engaged in the book. And I actually enjoy that aspect, this little conflict between being X and our main protagonist. I think Tanya is sent up north to kind of just be like a scout and be the Empire's eyes, and they're winning. Nevertheless, she is told that she cannot flee when there's there are enemy mages trying to take out the eyes in the sky for the Empire, but she wants to. She doesn't want to fight, and she wants to retreat, and she uses all these languages, pretends to be always she's still living that life where she's looking at the military as a corporate organization, and she wants to climb it, and she wants to know. Always she's worried about her image, how people perceive her, and she's just espousing patriotism, and just it's so awesome and it's cool. I like that. I like this calculating idea of saying something but you don't believe in it, and so we've seen a lot of characters that do things because and that's the cool thing. She has her own agency, yet at the same time the world is her agency versus the world, versus being X that's also manipulating it, and the whole thing is rigged up against her. So she's in this airspace, and she confronts the enemy, the group that sees her, and she wants to get away, but something happens. She does the unthinkable. She delays them and takes damage in a way that once reinforcement reach her, she's already damaged, and they give her one of the biggest badge, like the best award, the Silver Wing Assault Badge, and that badge is only given to individuals that did something so heroic, or that they went above and beyond, that usually the receivers of this assault badge are generally already dead. That they get it after post, that nobody really gets this badge while they're alive. That's how big deal. So that's it. In like chapter 1 or one of the first 3 chapters, she's already accomplished the highest accomplishment the military can give out, and they have to give it to her because she survived against, I think, a platoon of mages, and pretty much does her job, like halts them, damages a few of them, and becomes. Now the interesting part, I think my favorite part was the next arc, where she goes to test the Elysium type Computation Orb, and this is where we see being X's in a way immaturity, being X that's being represented here. This being that wants human beings to worship or to be religious. That's their motivation for pushing Tanya and experimenting with Tanya. And this part was the coolest part, because she's always put in a situation that's just hazardous and always can lead to her destruction. It's destruction. She's at the premises of destruction always, and that is the weird thing. She's just thrown into these situations that are horrible for any, and then an 8-year-old being. So talk about child abuse. Let me hit some of the characters right now. There's Major von Largen, who is very, very suspicious of Tanya, and I actually like that. It's cool that everybody doesn't see this, that something is up. So it's cool that he has these spidey senses about her and feels uneasy about, Tanya Degorchikov. Von Schugel, though, is a crazy, mad scientist, and just, You know what? I hope you. That part was the coolest part. I think the second arc, and it just gets better. Every arc is it's you feel sorry for Tanya throughout her engagements. So she gets the silver wing assault at the Norden, and then she actually succeeds in the lithium type computation orb. You know, the testing, the ordeal that she's put through, and then finally she escapes that, only to go back into the front line and become or be sent to actually be the leader of a of a group that just got a platoon that was just that was put together recently, that hasn't even been trained yet very well, and so she's always given and that's how it is. Tanya, but Tanya is not as evil as maybe the title suggests. It's more of her reacting to the world and trying to conserve, or to the best of her ability, her agency as the individual, because she believes in the individualism's freedom of choice. That is the biggest, concern that she has. And in a way, being X is actually, manipulating, betraying, and coercing her into becoming a faithful believer. In a way, the biggest, she feels that she's being contaminated by religious dogma, and that she feels, because every time the competition, or which later on that she succeeds in experimenting with, well, the only success is a miracle, that the competition orb that she uses will explode unless she prays to God and praises God and says, "Oh, Holy Father," and pray against her own will sometimes, that the prayer comes onto her like some sort of like a seizure, and she becomes this religious fanatic in front of, while everybody's looking at her, like, she has to pretend like she's patriotic because she doesn't agree with the things that are coming out of her mouth. But she has this fear that, is she being maybe desensitized mentally, that being X has invaded her ideology, her mental space with religious dogma. And it's just the struggle. So that's the struggle. The struggle is between Tanya, the individual, the freedom-loving, kind of her idea of freedom, by the way. So her freedom-loving, her choice, agency, and thinking about human resource, and saying that the reason religion failed was the model was messed up from the get-go. Oh, and she shifts the blame onto the people that made the model themselves. Her criticism is well put, well thought out too, and is very convincing and funny. And I just enjoyed it. I enjoyed her whole argument against, the being X and religion, or any form of religious doctrine. And I just could not. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed that. So I'm reading the volume 2, and I didn't really touch up on a lot of her accomplishments. The War College is another one, and later on she trains. I think is it a platoon or because she every time she puts herself in these situations to get out of different situations, but she sets her up. It's an accidental genius in some sense. So that's what I have for Tanya the Evil, the Saga of Tanya the Evil. I really enjoyed it, but it's tough. So I would just say that the writing is going to be tough, the jargon, and other than that, it's the tome, man. It is a tome. So let me know what you guys' thoughts are on this. But yeah, that's what I got for this, and peace.